Hey, you guys, welcome to an amazing series that we are in, leaders and learners in the special education space. I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. If we haven't met, we're so glad that you're here. We want to introduce you to the great Jennifer Swan. Jennifer is a constitutional lawyer turned public speaker who's found her purpose and passion in sharing her journey as the mother of a child living with a life-threatening neuromuscular disease. She shares her insights in 15 years in the making on her daughter's superpower of living into her fullest potential, despite the fact that she cannot move and requires 7 machines every day just to stay alive. Jennifer leveraged this for many years on stage as a musical theater performer and her passion professional development to deliver inspirational, heartfelt, and relatable content. She's widely regarded as a national gifted speaker who connects with her audiences by sharing honestly and vulnerably her path to empowered living. Jennifer and her daughter have been featured on multiple prominent local media outlets, including KCAL News and the Voice of OC. Jennifer comes to us from California. Jennifer, welcome. We're so glad that you are here.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes.
I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all tonight. I am so excited to get to share my story. And if you guys are anything like me, you probably have 100 other things you could be doing right now. So the fact that you're here means a lot to me. And heck, you may be doing some of those things while you're listening in. And I'm good with that too, because who doesn't love a good multitasker? But in all seriousness, I hope that you walk away with something that resonates with you. So I want to start with a story. When my son was 4 years old and my daughter was 18 months old, we had planned to take a cross-country trip by train to Chicago. And it was going to be 2.5 days on the train, and we were going to stay in the sleep cars and eat on board the restaurant in the train. And my son was absolutely beside himself with excitement. And so the day finally comes when we're supposed to leave, and we load everything up into the car. And it was 2 toddlers. So it was a lot of stuff, suitcases and strollers and car seats. And we get to the train station and we unload everything and we head inside to check in with the ticket agent. And we pass the train that says it's going to Chicago. And we go inside, and my mom, who dropped us off at the train station, or was going to drop us off at the train station, sat with my kids. And I got in line with my husband, and I hand the tickets to the ticket agent. And he looks at the tickets and he hands them back. And he says, "Ma'am, these tickets are for tomorrow." So here's my son, who is just cannot contain his excitement at being able to board this train that he can see. And I have to tell him that we have to wait 24 hours to get on this train. And it was awful. I felt like the worst mother in the world. And I knew that was going to be the longest 24 hours of my life. So I tell him, "Mommy messed up. I made a mistake. We got to the train station a day early." And he was totally devastated, big tears, didn't really understand what was happening, just knew that he wasn't getting on that train. So we head back to the car, we load everything back up, and we drive home. Complete silence in the car the entire drive home. And then my husband starts clapping when we pull into the driveway. "Nice job, everyone. Excellent dry run. We go live tomorrow." And I love that story because it's not just an example of how endearing and hilarious my husband can be, but it's also serves as a really beautiful reminder to me to ask myself if I am going live in my own life. Am I living a life that I love? And am I living the most expansive version of the life available to me? And for a very long time, the answer to that question was no for me. When my daughter was 9 months old, she was diagnosed with a terminal neuromuscular condition called spinal muscular atrophy, SMA for short. It's considered to be the childhood version of ALS. At the time, there were absolutely no treatment options. SMA doesn't affect the mind, but ultimately we were told our child would lose all voluntary muscle movement. Kennedy had never achieved the ability to sit up and unassisted or crawl or walk. And by the time she was a year old, she had also lost her ability to swallow, cough, and breathe on her own. We didn't know if she would live past her second birthday. And by the time she was 1, she had a feeding tube to eat, a machine that coughed for her, and a BiPAP to help her breathe overnight. She required two daily respiratory treatments when she was healthy and round the clock treatments every 2 to 4 hours when she was sick. So here's the thing. When we find ourselves in a circumstance that is challenging, we assign a meaning to that circumstance. We tell ourselves a story about it. And in challenging circumstances, the story is almost always a negative one. Would you agree? So we question why this happened to us. We rail against the injustice of it. We feel sorry for ourselves, and we feel justified in feeling sorry for ourselves. And this mindset keeps us in victim energy, and it traps us in the circumstance. And there is no potential in victim energy. There's only suffering. So what is the cost of keeping ourselves trapped in the circumstance? In my opinion, the cost is life itself. It's the missed opportunity to experience the things in your life that bring you joy, that fulfill you, that give you purpose, and that make you feel alive. And when a child gets diagnosed with a life-threatening condition, we are already finding ourselves mourning the loss of the life we thought they would have and the life we thought we would have. But if we choose to forgo the life that is still available to us, now we have endured the pain twice. And I believe the only thing that is really limited in this human experience is our time on this planet. One of the greatest gifts of my daughter's diagnosis was that it brought me to a new level of gratitude for life itself. Simply being alive is the greatest gift that any of us has. The opportunity to experience this beautiful planet, the opportunity to love and be loved, the opportunity to live your passion and your purpose, the opportunity to be of service. These are uniquely human gifts. And no matter what the status of your health is today, tomorrow is not guaranteed. So today is the day to really start living. So here's what I have learned in this lifetime, navigating some pretty challenging circumstances. How we view our circumstance is everything. How we hold it in our mind dictates the path that we find ourselves on in this lifetime. But most of us are not living the life that we would love to be living because we have given our power away to the circumstance. We have resigned ourselves to living a life that is so much smaller than what is actually available to us. And maybe we can't change the circumstance, but it is a choice to give our power to it and accept some version of life that is less than what is actually available to us. And today I want to offer you a reframe so that you can live into a far greater potential than you ever imagined, no matter what is going on in your life. And I want to tell you, it may not be the life that you pictured for yourself, but I promise that it will be a life worth living. So in the midst of the most unthinkable and maybe long-term challenges, there is a way to move forward that is life-giving and beautiful. And in my experience, these are the steps involved in that. The first is about stabilizing your systems. Then you shift your perspective, embody main character energy, filter out the naysayers, choose joy first, take action, take flight, and get out of your comfort zone, and then you can live without limits. And today I want to talk to you about shifting your perspective. So let's back up. What I didn't tell you was why we were headed to the Midwest by train so many years ago. We were going to Chicago by train so that we could then drive to Ohio State University to meet with doctors who were involved in groundbreaking gene therapy research to treat SMA. And as a side note, that gene therapy is now available. It is an FDA-approved gene therapy to treat this condition. And there are 2 other therapies on the market. So the prognosis today for babies who are diagnosed with SMA is nothing like it was when Kennedy was diagnosed. But at the time, there were no treatment options. And we were desperate for hope for a different path than for our daughter. And we wanted a life for her that was so much greater than what this disease seemed to offer. If I'm being honest, we wanted a cure because the idea of accepting her prognosis was crushing. And I had so much resistance to our reality. I remember that after her diagnosis, I could not buy clothes for her that didn't fit her in that moment because I could not bear the thought of seeing a closet full of clothes that she would never grow into if this disease took her life. And every once in a while, I would see a healthy little girl who had the same curly brown hair and big, beautiful eyes that Kennedy had, and who looked like what I imagined Kennedy would look like, running and jumping and hanging off my leg and playing. And it stopped me in my track. Again, over and over, mourning what was never going to be. And our life got so small. We lived in a bubble because I knew that a common cold could kill my daughter. I hardly left the house with her unless we were going to be outside, and certainly not during cold and flu season. We were incredibly selective about who we let into our home, and we took every precaution to prevent illness. And yet, even though I was trying so hard to keep her safe, she was in and out of the pediatric ICU 2 to 3 weeks at a time, multiple times every year. Living small wasn't creating safety. It was just creating a small life. So during one of those hospital stays, I started daydreaming, and I wondered what it would be like for my family to take a Disney cruise to Alaska. My daughter absolutely loved everything Disney, and I loved Alaska. I had been there before, and my family could really use a vacation. So I started bringing it up with the doctors and soliciting opinions about, could we do this? Is this something we could make happen? Absolutely not. No cruise ship is equipped to handle a medical emergency like she could have. Her care is way too complicated. Nobody's ever heard of her disease. What if she gets sick? They don't know how to place a breathing tube. You're literally risking her life if you take her on this cruise. We strongly advise against it. Don't make us call CPS on you. That's the response I got. But my family needed this cruise. And so I did my footwork. I talked to the medical staff on the cruise line. I bought travel insurance that would pay for her to be airlifted off the ship if that became necessary. I planned for every contingency I could think of. I was prepared to bring 2 pieces of every single piece of medical equipment that she used. I mitigated every risk that I could mitigate. And we went on this Disney cruise to Alaska. And I was terrified the entire time. The farther the ship traveled from cities I knew had pediatric hospitals, the more anxiety I had because I knew the risk that I was taking. But my daughter came alive on that cruise, and I want to share some pictures with you. This is Kennedy at 3.5. She was 3.5 years old, and I met a version of her that I had never met before. She was living. She was loving every minute of it. She was meeting princesses. She was watching stage shows in the ship's theater. She touched a glacier and got to pet Alaskan husky puppies. And I started asking myself, why am I working this hard to keep her alive if I am not actually going to let her live? So we successfully completed that cruise without incident. And while we were still on board, we booked another cruise for 2 months later to the Caribbean. And in the Bahamas, I carried her into the ocean water at a resort facility, and she kissed a dolphin. Since then, Kennedy has had her hair braided in Jamaica. She has seen a volcano erupt on the big island of Hawaii. and she has traveled the US flying with an FAA exemption to lie flat across 2 seats. I imagine that some of you might be thinking, well, that's great for you, but we don't have the means to travel in this way. And I totally I appreciate that. But I want to be clear. My message is not about the travel. It's the idea that people will tell you what you get to do and what you don't get to do, what is possible for you and what is not possible for you. But you get to decide how to live your own life. You get to do it, whatever it is, anyway. And there are an infinite number of ways for any one person to live into a more expansive life. Kennedy is 15 years old today. She cannot move. She has a tracheostomy and is dependent on a ventilator to breathe. Cannot cough or swallow. She eats through a feeding tube and she requires 24-hour care. This doesn't stop her from doing anything. She attends school in person with a nurse. She hangs out with friends. She has sleepovers. She has been camping, hiking, built sandcastles on the beach, floated down a lazy river, cultivated a FaceTime relationship with her boy band crush, completely on her own, starting at the age of 3, mind you. She's a regular at Disneyland. She performs in musical theater with a caregiver on stage. These are some of the productions she's been in. She's in her high school show choir and her high school color guard. And Kennedy is fully aware of her disability, but she does not hold it in her mind as the reason that she can't do what she loves. She does it anyway. So here's the thing. You get to decide what meaning to assign to any circumstance in your life. You get to decide how much you will let that circumstance limit you. You get to decide whether a doctor or a school administrator gets to tell you how your child lives. You get to decide to let this circumstance simply be a fact that has no power over you, or you can give it all your power. You get to flip the script and use the circumstance for your own evolution. My daughter taught me this. I have been supporting her living into her fullest potential for a decade. But it was only just recently that I decided that I too could live into a greater potential. By training and education, I am a constitutional lawyer, and I have managed a very part-time stint working in this field for many years now, which only came after my daughter's health was stabilized. But for more than a decade, I saw my caregiving role as one that prevented me from really leaning into what I would love. I had too much on my plate, too many responsibilities, and even with nursing help, the demands of managing her caregiving, her therapies, her doctor's appointments, the nurse call-offs, the prescription refills, the supportive services, it was just too much for me to move past. But something inside of me knew that I was being called to something greater. I was being called to share our story and my daughter's extraordinary outlook in an unbelievably challenging circumstance. So here I am, doing it anyway, choosing to live into the most expansive possibilities for my life while I am still the primary caregiver for a child who requires 24-hour care. And here's the thing. You can live into your greatest potential no matter what circumstance you find yourself in right now. And it is a matter of shifting your perspective so that rather than allowing the circumstance to trap you in a cage, you view the circumstance as the means by which you will grow into your greatness. So I'm going to start screen sharing one more time here. All right. Back with color guard. Here's the reframe. The challenging circumstance in your life is not a cage. It's a portal. Walk through the portal with an open mind and an ever expanding potential will be unlocked and your greatest gifts unveiled. Well, how do we do that? Well, the first step is to practice acceptance. What do I mean by that? I mean, accept the situation that you're in. Let's assume that those of us who are listening to this presentation can't change the circumstance that we're in. And the only rational choice is to accept it. We don't surrender our power to the circumstance, but we do surrender the fight to make it something other than what it is. And once we do that, we make space for a totally different reality to unfold than we ever imagined. And I don't want to overwhelm you today. I've given you some stuff to think about already. But if you're interested in learning the rest of this framework for this shift in perspective, I'm happy to connect with you on social media. And I'm going to share our handles on the next slide. So we are on Instagram and TikTok at diagnosis_magical. And if you would love to connect there, I would love to stay in touch. You can reach out to me and I can send you the framework that I just referenced. And it's got 5 more steps to it that we just get to practice every single day so that we can open ourselves up to a greater life than we might be currently living. On diagnosis_magical, we share all of the really cool things that Kennedy is doing in her life and how she lives into her life in such beautiful ways every single day. So on those platforms in the next few months, I will be announcing 2 coaching programs. The first one is called Living Proof: Limits Are an Illusion. And this is a coaching program specifically for parents or caregivers of children with challenging medical needs who want to learn how to live into their greatest potential and support their children in doing the same. And the second one is called Engage Your Inner Counsel. And this is a coaching program for anyone who is being called to something greater but does not know what that is, or someone who knows exactly what they want and is looking for a reliable system to build that. As a certified life mastery consultant with the Brave Thinking Institute, I will lead you through the Dream Builder program, which is designed by spiritual teacher Mary Morrissey. So I want to thank you for having me. I hope that you heard something of value. And if you walk away with nothing else today, I want you to walk away with this. If you are willing to shift your perspective about the challenging circumstance in your life, I promise you it will open doors that you thought were locked shut. My daughter's story changed my life. Now let's change yours. Thank you.
That's so good, Jennifer. Thank you. I know everybody else is saying thank you too. I'm going to open up the chat for everybody. And Denise contact Cindy's. Let me see if I got this right. It's always smarter than I am. Host and panelist. Okay. So Cindy is going to jump on and look for that. Yes, thank you so much. That was incredible. What I do know is even if we don't know the way, there always is a way. So thank you for living out loud. I did have a couple of questions if I can offer those to you. Is that okay? So as somebody that served kids with disabilities and had a child with disability, and it doesn't matter what your child's disability is, whether it's dyslexia or what Kennedy, that challenge is that challenge. But on the additional part of that level of medical care, constant care, what do you do? And I'm not a fan of the word self-care. If it's your favorite thing, I'm sorry. But what do you do to be healthy and be well and go to the end of the driveway and have some time for yourself? Because you can't, I mean, you tell me, what do you do?
Well, that is actually the first part of my curriculum for special needs parents. It's stabilizing your systems. And it has 3 parts to it. And the first one is my opinion, and this isn't an opinion that is shared by everyone, but for me, I don't believe that any one person can carry this burden by themselves. I just think that that's too much on one person. And so I use nursing care. And I don't have 24-hour nursing care, but I do have a good amount of nursing care. And that frees me up to do what I want to do and be who I want to be and show up how I want to show up. I exercise regularly. That really helps my mind stay focused. I have a morning routine that I engage in every day. I have readers that I read and I do some journaling and I take that time for myself in the morning. And I cultivate friendships with with people. And I'm not going to say that that I did this in the beginning. It's really buried in that caregiving role for years. And it took me a very long time to realize that I wasn't filling my own cup first. And it cost me in my health being poor and my hair falling out and all sorts of things that no one wants to be dealing with, on top of having a child with extraordinary needs. So I know today that pouring into myself first is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. So, what are some misconceptions about disabilities or the disability that your child has that you think you wish more people understood?
Well, for Kennedy, I think people assume that she's not there cognitively. She, they see her in her chair and they immediately feel sorry for her, and they talk to me rather than talking to her.
Yes.
And
Good.
and so when they talk to me, I'll look at Kennedy and I'll wait for her to answer, or I'll redirect the question to Kennedy. Um, I I think that the way that Kennedy lives is that she's completely unafraid to be exactly who she is and to show up exactly as she is. So I showed you those pictures of her in musical theater. So she's on stage there with an aide or a caregiver because she doesn't even have the strength to operate a power chair. So she's in a manual chair. She has to be moved around. And she's not really, physically doing any of the choreography. She does sing, but in her mind, she is. And I think one of the expectations that people have in life, in our society, is if you can't do it the way everybody else does it, it's not worth doing. And that isn't how she lives. She chooses joy first. She chooses to live into what brings her joy, even if it doesn't look like it looks when everybody else does it. And it's such a beautiful way to live, because imagine how much more freedom we would have had to explore things in our lives and find things that bring us joy if we let ourselves just show up exactly as we are.
Absolutely. So good. So, of course, this is definitely in my wheelhouse, but how did you navigate, or did you navigate the educational system successfully? It's
Um,
a loaded question, isn't it?
it is. Man. So I'm going to be frank here. My husband and I are both attorneys, and that helped because they knew that they couldn't steamroll us, and they knew that we weren't going to allow them to not give her what she was entitled to under the law. So I do think that helped. It did get sticky a few times, um, but I also, when I didn't know, because I like to tell people, it's like when, I'm a constitutional lawyer. When people ask me questions about like rental agreements for their apartment or whatever, I'm like, you're like asking a cardiologist about how do I heal my gout in my foot. Like, I don't know anything about your rental agreement. So, even though I'm a lawyer, I don't know special education law like I know constitutional law. So I consulted people who I needed to consult to find out, well, what can I do and what can't they do and what is she entitled to? And then I stood my ground when I knew something, that I knew she was entitled to something. And, it involved conversations with people that were uncomfortable a lot of times, because people want to put her in a box and say, well, here's where we think she would fit in, and here's, what she's capable of uh, in our minds. And they don't know her at all. They don't know her at all, and they don't give her the chance to blossom. And so I'm not going to lie, we had a couple of, filings that had to be made at various points.
Thank you.
But
Yeah,
yeah, it happens. It
it
happens. But
happens.
we have a beautiful system right now. She has a one-on-one aide in school, and she attends with a nurse. She's on a modified schedule because her tolerance is not that, her stamina is not that of a normal kid. She gets really tired and exhausted, and she also has a seizure disorder, so that can expose her to, being out and about and doing too much can expose her to risk too. So we have a really flexible IEP. And our district has, for the most part, they've been cooperative around it.
Awesome. It is Kennedy your only child?
I have an 18-year-old son.
And so how do you navigate you know, the great thing about parenting is it's crystal clear when you look back. And I know when my first child had a disability, um, I he just demanded my attention. I'm sure there's a nicer word. I don't know how else to say it. And I don't have regret, but I know that my daughter, it was about my son, right? And so how do you calibrate that? Not that as somebody asked me today about work-life balance, I'm like, that's an illusion. But how do you calibrate that in that her needs require, they literally require so much attention with her siblings?
That that has been the toughest road to hoe, quite honestly, because my husband works full time, and so I am the one who knows the ins and outs of her care. I work very, very part time, and I work from home, and there's a lot of flexibility around when I'm working, and I'm available when things are needed, and when the nurse calls off, I'm the nurse. So I know her care better than anyone. So I am the person who gets called in a circumstance. Um, I will say that, that was really, really hard in the beginning before we had as much nursing as we do now. And it was, and I was really trying to control the situation. I wanted to be the one who was there all the time. And I didn't want to hand over those reins to anyone else. It took me a long time to trust someone else with her care. And, I think my relationship with my son suffered for that because um, he was, he knew that she was required these things, but that doesn't make it easier when you're 3 or 4 or 5. And, I do what I can to schedule individual time with him. Um, to make him feel like he's a priority too, because he is, of course he is. But it is, it is a tough road to walk because the reality of the situation is one that it's not typical, and it's not like we just split our time 50-50. And I do think it involved, in our case, a willingness on both my part and my husband's part to swap roles. So my husband had to get more familiar with her care, and I had to be willing to let him get familiar with her
Yeah.
care so that he could step in and I could spend time with my son, so that it wasn't always mom is with Kennedy and dad is with Jacob. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's good. That's good. When so you have a husband, that's amazing. Are y'all going to Chick-fil-A on Thursday night for a hot date? What do you take time for your marriage? Do you have an opportunity to do that?
We our goal is to have a date night every single night. That doesn't always happen. I mean, every night, that would be
That's
nice.
great.
Every week.
Jennifer, sign me up for that course.
It doesn't always happen that way. It's better. We're far more reliable on that front when we put it in the calendar well in advance, so nothing else slides in there. We also have a check-in that we do every single week with each other, where we dedicate a time on Sunday and we check in with, how are you doing on this front? How are you doing on this front? And we have this list of questions that we go through, and where can we do better, and where can I support you better, and where do you need more support? And that helps us know where the other person is, whether we're being good communicators or not.
Right.
So that's really helpful.
That's paramount. I think the statistics are around 88% of parents of a child with a disability get divorced, which is I was on a call the other day, and I was my client who I love all my clients. And I said, oh, is he coming in from the other room? And she said, I'm at my apartment. And I am a divorced parent. I mean, I just as their advocate, I want to fix everything, but life period is hard. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open up for our attendees. So knowing the proclamation, and people mean well, but I want people to speak life over me and my family. I do not want your spoken word curse. I understand that you need to give me the information, but that doesn't mean that's our destination. So knowing that that's what they said, the professionals, the specialists, the clinicians said about her prognosis when she was a toddler, has their language around that changed for you now that she's made so many gains?
Well, so something, miraculous happened in her lifetime, and that is 3 treatments came on the market for SMA. Now, by the time they came on the market, um, her disease was too advanced to really reverse anything, but it did stop the progression of the disease. So, and she made some gains that not really functional gains. Like it's not like she can now hold a pencil and write, but she, her swallow improved a little bit. So she was no longer aspirating her own secretions, and her ventilator settings came down a little bit. And she just really stabilized. The other thing is that we had her trached at 4, and that really seemed to help with her health. She has not been hospitalized with illness since she was 4.
Oh, wow.
So that's amazing. We plan to continue that trend. Yeah, I don't think people know better now than to talk to me about her prognosis. So I
Yeah.
guess that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you. What a powerful, powerful, powerful story. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to open it up. Cindy, are there questions from our attendees for Jennifer in the chat?
We have comments, but at this time we do not have any questions.
Do you want to read the comments?
I would love to read the comments. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your daughter's story. Thank you for Jennifer for your amazing work and service to your daughter. You are so very inspiring and inspirational. Jennifer, your story is so inspiring. I found my new purpose. After my divorce, where I successfully advocated for my autistic children's needs, I'm now honored to be a certified special needs divorce coach, supporting other parents and caregivers as they navigate divorce challenges to advocate for their children themselves. Thank you for sharing your story. My heart needed to hear that. I can move past my circumstances to find my new purpose. You are very inspirational.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Well, Jennifer, thank you for coming on. You're a phenomenal speaker. I can't imagine having 2 attorneys in the house. I would just be like, objection, leading the witness, hearsay. So that's fantastic. We would love to have you back on again. We would love to hear about Kennedy's greatness. But thank you again for coming on. For those of you that enjoyed the story, we're going to post it permanently on the great YouTube. Again, you can find her at, I will let you give the handles again.
Yes, that's at diagnosis_magical.
At diagnosis_magical. And I just followed her. So that's, the good news is, that we win and that our kids win and that they are ridiculously amazing. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you on the next webinar.